Okay, let's get started with this here. Now, what we have here is the bushings are pressed in, okay, into the end of the control arm, and you see what I've done is this is actually popped out, and one of the reasons why it's popped out is because the pin that holds this to the frame of the car, as I was trying to drive it in, it got stuck, and then of course it pulled the bushing out with it. It's really just pressed in. Everything is pressed in. So one of the things that happens is there's a couple of things going on here. The outer ring, which you see here, is pressed in. So when that happens, this ring's going to crush down. And it crushes down on this bushing and holds that bushing sort of in place. And of course inside this bushing is a steel ring, which you can see here. So what we have to do, okay, is the first step is when you clean one of these, you can polish it up with a bit of crocus cloth. There's always a few nicks. You got to make sure that there's no taper or wear on it. It's polished and it's free of any burrs. And then, okay, the bushing here has a steel ring inside of it. The steel ring here. That we're going to burnish that a little bit. We're going to just ream it out, or as I like to say, hone it a bit to fit it. And so, with the camera in one hand, I have to try to do this. We want it to just sort of slip down on there, and with a bit of force. I mean, it should be tight, okay, because you can't have any real play, otherwise the whole thing will just slop around. So this was a little too tight. In fact, they were all a little too tight, and it's got to go through all four bushings and align itself all the way through. So now the trick is to get this bolt here in through, pass through all of those bushings without it jamming up and causing issues. So we now have to sort of hand fit. See that it's already getting stuck in there and it will not pass. And it's because the inner steel bushing is a little tight. You see it's starting to go down a little bit, right? So this one doesn't need as much honing. So some will. See, this one's kind of just ready to drop in there. Right? Oh, we dropped it on the floor. That's good. See, that one's not too bad. So that's what we're working on now. So we want to make sure that this is sort of a hand fit thing. You're going to run into problems like this. But it's better to do it now on the bench, and then by the time everything's done, see how that just pressed right on there? Look at that. That just slid right on. Now we can take this bushing, put it back into that socket, and we will test fit to make sure that this bolt passes all the way through without any issues, and its companion bolt, because they should both be the same. All right, this one needs a little bit of polishing, a little bit more polishing. So they should all be the same. And then once we've achieved that, then we know that the bushings are installed and that when I go to assemble it, it's going to fit, it's going to go in, and it's not going to get stuck. All right? So we're going to sign off now. We're going to go back to work and continue fitting these bushings together, and I'll show you the results of the pins inside of them sort of put to the side when I'm done. I will be back shortly. Right, well, here we are today. We're going to work on the parts and begin our reconfiguration and fitment. We've got a good look at these spindles here that I've cleaned up and I've taken to polishing the bearing surfaces. Very nice. And you see how the end caps are all nice and clean. I've tossed about all of the bolts and whatnots, all pre-cleaned and wire wheeled, and now we're going to look at how to press in a bushing. So what I've got is I've got my diagonal arm chucked up in the good old handy dandy 12-ton hydraulic jack press machine. I've got a series of fixtures and bits of whatnot jammed together to press this bushing in. And let's see what happens when we apply a bit of pressure. Oh, look, it's inserting. Oh, it's going down. Yes, and that bushing is being pressed into its receptacle. Look at how nice. So, right, so what we're going to do, and you can see how nice I've cleaned up the bearing races and the axle end of this diagonal arm. So what we're going to do is we're going to shut the video down, and we're going to flip it over and show you the other side. This is almost seated, just a few more pumps of the old jackster, and we'll have it right and jolly good. stand by. Okay, let's see if we can see this. So what I've done is I've got the bolt here that actually screws this whole piece into the frame, and I'm using this as a pilot, all right, to make sure that these two are going to be centered to each other, so that as I press it down, okay, as the bearing seats in, all right, it's going to align it a little bit better. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take it back out. So now that it's straight, we're going to take it back out and take that bolt out. And then I think this is pretty straight now, and I should be able to put it in, because what we just wanted to do is make sure that this was going to go in straight and that bolt was going to be able to pick up the center of that. So we're going to take it back apart. We're going to check for that. Alright, welcome back. Here we are now. We've got, notice here, we've got the bolt all the way through these bushings. That's all complete, and so it passes all the way through, and I can take this out by hand and even turn it, but it's still tight. Now we've got it chucked up in the press, and we're actually installing the bearing. Alright, I actually just see if we can get a close-up of that. You can see it, just put a little pump on it, and you can see it going in. So now we're going to drive it in. Alright, I'm going to finish driving it in, and then the C-clip goes on, and then the seal, and then we have to flip around and do the other side. But so we'll do this one, and we'll prep up the next one. We'll do the same side. You know, this is the inner. Alright, so we're going to do the inner, and we're going to do the inner on the other one. Alright, and then we'll put the seals on and all that, and the snap ring, and then we're going to do the outer. Alright, so let's back out. You can see the setup. And we'll close this out, and we'll be back in a bit. Welcome to the rebuilt 1979 Beetle, Volkswagen Beetle. Rear diagonal arm, and it's cleaned up form here. And so what we see here is on the bench is the axle shaft, and I hope that I'm getting a good shot of this. We see a nice clean axle shaft with the bushing, the pin, everything lubed up. There'll be some finished lube put on here prior to installation. And what we want to just look at briefly is, as we move this around a little bit, try to find a better position for it. Okay, so it moves nice and free inside here. I'm trying to work with two hands. One hand on the camera. Moves nice inside. This is one of the reasons why, yeah, you could probably do a lot of this work on the car itself, but if you notice some of the films and pictures I've taken where you see me pressing in the bearings and pressing them out, that can become difficult. Of course, cleaning up an old arm like this is absolutely filthy, and having the possibility of dirt getting into a very closed system like this. Once this cap, as you can see, I've got the seal, bearing seal, the front bearing seal and cap. Once this cap goes on, this is a closed system. This is a closed environment, so there's certainly nothing like being able to take this all apart, clean it up really good, make sure it's well inspected, make sure that you've removed all the burrs. I've showed you some of that earlier. Making sure all the bearings are seated, they go in straight, and making sure that everything goes together completely lubed with all fresh lube, everything is cleaned out, you don't have dirt falling in, you're on a clean work surface that you can control. And it's just one of those things where it's actually, they made it relatively easy to get out. It does require perhaps realigning, but being able to inspect this very critical area for any damage and getting it properly lubricated and clean and lubricated back together again, absolutely important. So it's one of those things where, you know, this is a situation where you're probably better off doing it, you know, on the table, doing a nice job, taking your time and doing it right, because this goes back together and the nut gets torqued on. When this gets reinstalled, you shouldn't have to service this for probably 100,000 miles, and you're ensuring that some very expensive and kind of rare parts actually don't get damaged in the process. You want to make sure that you never really want to have these splines get beat up in the process, and they can get beat up. The bearings certainly can. All this, all the threads in here, everything tapped out. chased out, cleaned, you know, everywhere you look, just deburred, making sure that there's nothing there that's going to cause a problem. So here we have it. The workbench is a mess, so now it's time to clean up. We've got the other one over there, and so I'm going to find a place to store these and put these aside and bag them and cover them so that dirt doesn't get in. And then we have our bucket of clean bolts and oiled bolts ready for final lubrication and assembly. And so now it's time for a little cleanup, and stay tuned for the next step in the series as we go back to the vehicle and take a look at the next part of this project and see what we can take out of that and refurbish it before this goes back in. So stay tuned.